Thank you, Sud, and thank you for that wonderful introduction. And great to be here with all you folks. I definitely wish it was in person, but I guess this is what the best we can do right now, considering the situation that we are in. So, what I wanted to talk about today are transportation trends that we can expect to have an impact on us in the coming year. I specifically want to focus, given the pandemic situation, on how those trends are going to are going to affect us in terms of safety-related items. So what I'm going to go through today, first of all, is the way things used to be. I looked back just a couple of years ago at a presentation that I had given in front of you then, and it struck me how much things have changed in such a short amount of time. So I wanted to touch on a few of those things that I discussed about back then, just to place our discussion today in some perspective. I also want to talk about what I call here freight-onomics. So essentially, how the business of trucking affects how fleets are able to cope with safety-related issues. And then I also, as I mentioned right from the outset, I want to focus specifically on safety and the kind of impact that the pandemic and all the things that have resulted from the pandemic, the kind of impact that they're having on our safety culture and some of the frankly sobering challenges that we have to face. And at the end of all that, I am open to any questions from you. So let's dive right in. So 2018, and we were looking. I was in front of you, and we were looking at a frankly a great year. I remember telling you that for the last year and a half, things have just been booming. Basically, every trucking CEO I had talked to they were telling me that something happened in the middle of 2017, and it was like someone turned the light switch on and just forgot to turn it off, because freight volumes were increasing. Every carrier seemed to be busy, and there was an upward push on rates which had been climbing very, very slowly since the 2008-2009 recession. All of a sudden, were starting to rise quite rapidly, and carriers were really starting to turn some nice profits. And what we were looking at then, with freight volumes being so high, was what could high freight volumes actually mean for safety? And it's interesting when you look back at some of the things that back then we thought could be issues. We talked about, how hiring decisions in this atmosphere of a lot of business, of really having to rush to get your trucks out there to meet the demand. We were seeing that, maybe hiring decisions were going to be rushed, and that the quality of the hires may not be as good as usual, A, because you're rushing to get people into your company, and B, because you don't have perhaps as much time to train them, or perhaps not as many quality people out there because everyone was hiring. We're also talking about the reverse, which is the increased turnover, as people were leveraging the tight labor market to move on to better paying jobs. It seemed like there was always someone down the street that could offer a little bit of a better wage, and drivers and other employees were taking advantage of this, of course, and moving on. And that was creating an issue with turnover. We're looking at training time. So much of a focus about getting the trucks out there to serve that demand, that and to get them quickly maintained as well, that you just didn't have the time to perhaps train as much as you would like. The training time was getting shorter. You're also saying yes to a whole bunch of new customers, and that created some issues about new customer locations, and are the new routes being properly vetted before you started on that business? And then also just proper maintenance practices. Would they suffer in order to keep trucks on the road to meet those high service freight demands? Those were the kind of problems we were looking at just a couple of years ago. I also introduced you to Jeff Priest from Bison Transport, one of the safest fleets in Canada, actually one of the safest fleets in North America, period. And what they had to say about safety, the grand prize winner of the TCA Safety Award. And what Jeff was saying is that, yeah, sure, we get a lot of awards. We have a really good name about safety, but what that really reflects is good decisions being made within our company, mile after mile, day after day, load after load. It's looking after the little things, day after day, that gets you that kind of great name in the industry in terms of safety. And it goes even further than that, in that it's the training, it's that culture of safety that starts from the top and works its way all through the entire company, that you have a focus on safety, that there is no cutting corners. Safety is part of the company culture, and you don't rest your laurels once you've won a few awards, once you have the reputation for safety. You're always worrying about that next mile and making sure it's as safe as the previous one. But I also want to bring it back to reality. We talk a lot in the Canadian trucking industry about safety. A lot of people say a lot of things about safety, but the reality is, in Canada, there are still 3 workplace deaths every day. 3 deaths each and every day. Workplace injuries and illnesses cost the nation $20 billion every year. The other reality is that research shows that companies with good safety records are also likely to have good overall financial performance. And the final thing that I raised with you was that the other reality, that CEOs do tend to look at safety as a cost center. And safety, while it is a major consideration, may not be the priority. They're more willing to invest in safety when their profit margins are healthy. We may not like that, but that is the honest reality. And I remember leaving you with a question. I said, since we have these high freight volumes right now, since rates are up, since fleets are profitable in the way they haven't been for several years, I said that if you have a safety initiative for your fleet that requires investment, this is the time to be pitching it to your executive team. Are you ready to pitch it to your executive team? That's what I asked you back in 2018, and I sure hope you did pitch it back then, because like I said from the outset today, boy, have things changed in terms of our financial outlook in such a very short period of time. So let's take a look at that. How deep is this ditch that the pandemic has created? How soon can we hope to get out of it? Just what is the real situation out there? This is from an Omnitrax webinar that I attended a couple of weeks ago. And what they've done is they've basically looked at trucking activity across the U.S., and they created some heat maps based on miles per month, looking at it from comparing it to the previous month. So let's start off with the heat graphic on the left. So that shows April, and that's just shortly after COVID-19 was called a pandemic. That's when we started seeing shutdowns of the economy in Canada and also in the U.S. The closer you are to red, the more that the greater the decline in trucking activity. So you take a look at places like Texas, Florida, the northeastern states. Look at Michigan and Wisconsin. When you're that bright red, you're looking at close to minus 40% drop in trucking activity. Now skip over. So that was at the height of the pandemic when we were first encountering it. Skip over to May. And you can see things are starting to turn green. Now, the greener you are, the better you are in terms of a positive return towards normalcy. And you can see the northeastern states, et cetera, they're starting to get a little bit closer to normal. They're no longer in the red. You're seeing Michigan and Wisconsin basically doing even better than that. And then we get into June and you're seeing more states, turning green. They've economy starting to come back. They opened up their economy earlier than Canada did. I would also argue nowhere near as cautiously as we did. So that's up to June, and things are looking good. It seems like that kind of the opening early kind of paid off, at least as far as the economy is concerned, even though their COVID-19 case counts were continuing to soar. All right, so as you can see, June there looking good, but then we get into July, and we start to get back into the red. And then August. So essentially what that is showing is that recovery that we were hoping in the US and likely in Canada, that it would continue, would be on an upward trajectory. That didn't happen. When we hit the summer months, things just started either staying the same or getting worse. As you can see, it's getting worse in several states. So that really has placed a pause on the recovery after the reopenings. If we take all that, we take all the regional stuff, and keep in mind it's important to look at it both regionally and on a national basis, because the pandemic did not hit us, whether it's in the US or Canada, didn't hit every area as strongly at the same time. It started out with the coasts and then moved inland. So if we put it all together and we look at nationwide changes in miles driven and take a look at April, so you see that in the red, put it all together, it was a minus 10% drop in miles driven in April because of the pandemic and the shutdowns. But then you see in May a 2% recovery, June 6% recovery. But then, as I mentioned, by the time we get to midsummer, the time we get to July, we're seeing 0% improvement from the previous month. And then by the time we get to August, now we're seeing that it's actually starting to go back the other way. August was a decrease from the previous month, which was frankly flat. So the recovery that we were hoping to have really has stagnated. and we can see that also, and we look at, and again, Omnitrax did a lot of work here to put all these together. Look at the impact on vehicles operated and also on drivers. So miles driven is in the green. You can see that it was actually trending upwards, and then up to March, and then started to drop. Dropped in April, and then has made slight improvements that have basically, as I mentioned, just flattened out through the latter parts of the summer. Vehicle counts basically followed the same path as there were fewer miles driven. Fleets were taking more vehicles off the road. But look what happened to drivers. So driver count is the one shown in blue. Notice the driver count was already dropping. Why? Because the U.S. was already heading into a slowdown in its economy prior to the pandemic. The pandemic, of course, made it worse, but now we are seeing drivers start to return. Things are starting to pick up, but still, we're not climbing up above where we would have been, say, at the end of last year. It's also, the other thing that we're seeing and is important to understand is that it's different depending on industry. Some industries have been hit harder than others and are experiencing the pain longer than others. Let's take a look at the converted paper products industry. And this kind of solves the riddle of what happened when there was all that, the rush on toilet paper. So you see, first of all, in terms of, if you look at it in green, miles driven for converted paper products. Look at that. They was already trending downward from the start of the year into February. And all of a sudden, we get that, that rush of people going to the stores and stocking up on toilet paper. And you see that spike in March in miles driven, and also in vehicles that are out there. But once we got our fill of toilet paper, I guess, that demand, look what's happened. It just completely dropped off. Look at it in terms of miles driven. Just completely dropped off by May, and then just slightly rising in June and July. Petroleum products. They were in decline before the pandemic. From January onwards, it's been a steady decline, and then just basically flatlining at a lower level in terms of both miles and vehicles. And then again, you look here at several industries. Manufacturing, for example, very important to trucking. And you see that there's drops, and then it's just kind of flatlining, not sharp rebounds. And these are all industries that the trucking fleets that are very important to many trucking fleets, and that's what's impacting their bottom lines. So as you can see, how deep is the ditch? We're certainly not out of that ditch that has been caused by the pandemic. There was already weakness in the economy before the pandemic got to us, and the pandemic just exacerbated things, and we're still in that. And with a second wave coming, I think there's going to be at least another 6 to 9 months of pain, of just trying to dig our way out of this huge ditch that we're in. Okay, so let's talk now about the specific impact on safety, and I want to focus in on some of the sobering challenges that we face. And for this, I'm going to turn to some of our own research, some of it just completed this year, much of it this summer. The interesting thing about the pandemic is that it's not only the medical reality that we have to deal with, but there's also the perception of the reality, how safe people feel to come to work, to invest in new business, to grow their business in this kind of atmosphere. One of the things we've done with our pulse surveys is ask people, when would you expect trucking-related activity to return to pre-COVID-19 levels? There's a few out there, about 15%, that are, quite optimistic, and you're thinking that, 1 to 6 months at most is how long we're going to be in this mess, and then things will get back to normal. But pay attention to those two middle numbers, the ones that feel that this mess that we're in is going to last 6 months to up to 2 years. Basically, more than 70% of you think that's the reality we're in. This is going to be a long haul. So, keep that in mind, because that's the perception that is out there amongst truck fleet executives, and this is what's driving their thinking as well. At the same time, we ask them, how long do you expect your trucking-related business to require all the health and safety measures that you have to have in place because of the pandemic in order for people to even consider coming to work? The social distancing, the face masks, all these things that really were not part of our lexicon just 6 months ago. And again, take a look at those middle numbers. Again, basically 2/3 of fleets think that fleet executives think between 6 months to 2 years is how long we're going to be having to come to work, if we go to work at all, with a face mask, that we have to be careful about social distancing, that we can't have as many people in the office as we used to. So again, some real sobering perceptions about how people are thinking. The people that are on the front lines, the people that are running companies, that are managers in companies, that are working for trucking companies, what they're thinking about how the pandemic is going to affect them, not only now, but into the future. We also ask them specifically, how safe do you feel on the job when it comes to COVID-19 on a scale of 1 to 5? Tell us what you think. So we had a 3.8 out of 5. So they're certainly not thinking they're very safe. They're certainly not thinking it's high risk. It's somewhere in the middle, tending more towards feeling safe. But in how they answer this, I want you to keep a couple things in mind about the demographics of who exactly works in our industry. So first of all, predominantly male still, and also predominantly older. So I'm comparing here the age of the average reader of today's trucking magazine. Notice the 45 to 54 and 55 to 64 age groups are our two largest age groups. And I think this represents the industry. Compare that to the Canadian population, which I show on the right, and you'll notice we've got a heck of a lot more 45 to 54 and 55 to 64-year-olds in our industry than there is in the Canadian population overall. And why would they be concerned about COVID-19 and how that could have an impact on them and their health? Well, look at this. First of all, remember, we have predominantly male people working in our industry. And look at this. I mean, males with COVID-19 tend to end up in the ICU a lot more often than females do. Also, if you look at it in terms of ages, look at that 50 to 59 age group. In terms of COVID-19 hospitalizations, that's the third highest group. So a lot of the people that work in our industry have good reason to be concerned about catching COVID-19 and also ending up in the ICU because of it. Now, the other thing that this pandemic has done is basically kind of changed the way we work. A lot of the work that used to be done in an office now needs to be done from home. So we asked them, does your trucking business require office employees to work from home because of COVID-19? More than half said yes. That surprises me to some degree. I would have thought that the figure might have been a bit higher than that. And the thing that I see in that particular number is all the challenges that go from taking people that are used to working in an office and then having them work from a home location. I know from when we did it from our company, and we've been working from home now since the beginning of March, I think since March 11th or something like that. The first challenge is the hardware. People that are used to working on desktops and don't have laptops, now you need to come up with laptops so they can work from home if they don't have a computer at home. You have to make sure that they're wired properly at home. You have to make sure that they can access your network from home accurately. All these issues that had to be solved. And that's before you even get to the issues such as how effective are people working from home? How effective are they when they can't regularly meet with their team in person the way they used to? And then we look at further into the future and ask, do you believe that office employees within your business will continue to work from home even after public health restrictions are eased? 40% believe that was the case, and I think it was the minority, but I think they were correct. Again, looking at our own situation here, I mean, our office is open, but as I speak to you from our office today, I can tell you out of a staff of close to 100, we have 3 here. I think this working from home is something that's going to continue for several months yet, and particularly if we are, as it seems we are, heading into a second wave. One of the positives that I see coming out of this is that we've been forced to move more quickly towards using electronic documents. Electronic documents make our industry more efficient. We should have been moving in that direction faster anyway. So it's good to see that we're taking this opportunity to do this, and that basically 9 in 10 believe that this will continue long term to our use of electronic documents. But there are some concerns. Now, again, when I look at a survey that Omnitrax did, where they asked fleets in recent months, has your level of vehicle maintenance changed? And you can see there, 2/3 said actually our vehicle maintenance has decreased. Now, I'm hoping that is because we simply have fewer vehicles on the road. They're not driving as far. That's the reason why vehicle maintenance is decreasing. I certainly hope there aren't some elements in there of maintenance being decreased simply because it costs money to do maintenance, and right now we're in a real financial crunch. But that remains to be seen. The reason I bring that up is because what I have seen historically in this industry, what happens to equipment purchasing decisions and the end result on safety when we do get financially crunched, when there is real pressure on finances. What does that do to our decision making when it comes to buying equipment, even if those decisions end up having an impact on safety? So let me give you an example here to do with tires. One of the most prominent costs for any fleet. Every year we ask fleets, how will you optimize your tire costs in the future? We ask both fleets and owner operators. Most of them will tell us that they're going to do this by better preventive maintenance practices. Great. But there is a large portion, look at the bottom of those two charts, that say the way we're going to optimize our tire cost is by acquisition price. In other words, we're going to spend less. We're going to look for the cheaper product. And then the other thing I want you to look at is the penetration of the really cheap offshore products into the Canadian market, tire products in the Canadian market that started coming in at the height of the last recession. Let's take a look first at owner operators. So these are, cheap offshore tires made in, places like India, China, etc. So right now, 43% of owner operators are telling us that they're using these tires. Back in 2006, look at that chart on the right. Only 10% were using it. And then we got hit by that recession, 2008, 2009, and look what happened since then. We go from a low of less than 20% by the time we get into 2008, all the way up to 45%. And it has basically stayed there. More than 40% of owner operators are choosing to use those brands in at least some of their tire positions. And if you think I'm picking owner operators, actually fleets, which definitely should know better, given all the resources they have in terms of researching different products, are actually worse. 48% of fleets are telling us they have used offshore tires the last 12 months. And if you look at it again historically, back in 2006, all the way up into the high 40s, and it has stayed there. They're continuing to invest in tires, which I would say, I think they know really are not the kind of tires that are the best to run on their vehicles. The other thing that we see happening during financially crunched time, difficult financial times like this, is an increase in the in knockoff parts, offshore products coming in at lower prices, pretending to look exactly like the actual product. And I'll show you a picture there of an actual product and a knockoff. Can you tell the difference? And I've seen carriers who have tell me that they would buy a trailer door strap that would be maybe 1/3 the price of the strap they should be buying, and watch in horror as that strap would break just as the driver's pulling on it, and the driver ends up falling on the ground on the road with cars passing by. And I expect to see more of these products hitting the market because people are looking for ways to save costs. Now, speaking of products, speaking of investing in the right products, one thing that we cannot afford to get wrong is ELDs. ELD mandate is coming in June next year. I find it rather shocking that when we survey fleets, we see only 55% telling us that their fleet is currently using ELDs. Interestingly enough, a similar amount are telling us that they still prefer the old traditional logbooks. 56%. Only 56% are saying that they prefer the ELDs to the traditional paper logbooks, which we know were not exactly accurate. And again, a high amount still believe that using ELDs to track hours of service won't necessarily help fight driver fatigue. That's kind of the concept or the perception that is out there, and those kind of things need to change. Here's something that's, again, concerning. So we asked them, do you believe your fleet will be ready for Canada's ELD mandate that's scheduled to start June 2021? Good that 63% say yes, but concerning that basically 37% either saying no or they're unsure. Without complying with that mandate, a fleet is in trouble. And yet we having 37% telling us less than a year away from that mandate coming down that they're not sure that they're going to be able to meet it. Also, when we ask them about the ELD mandate and the fact that there's third-party testing, and there has been some delays in choosing those third parties, should that be reason for a delay? Again, we see a fairly high amount, 43%, saying yes, there should be a delay. I hope they're not counting on that, because indications we have from the government so far is that that is not going to happen. And then just a little bit more on that. How prepared do you think the trucking industry is for that mandate, which comes, like I said, June 2021? 3.7% out of 10. Sorry, 3.7 on a scale of 1 to 10. Not that good. Not feeling too confident about it. And also interesting that they still think that even with everything going digital as opposed to the paper way that we do it now, that we still could face tampering. The one thing that is important to point out about ELDs, whether you believe in them or not, is that they do provide a way to make sure that the kind of waste of driver's time that happens now at shippers' docks, ELDs will give us a credible way to deal with that. When we ask carriers, how often are your trucks detained more than 2 hours by shippers? Basically, 2/3 of you are telling us that it happens from basically frequently to all the time. And yet, when we ask a follow-up question and say, okay, when you are detained by shippers at the loading dock, which is costing you money, which is causing your drivers to spend more time than they need to and tiring them out, how often do you actually collect detention fees? And look at the chart on the bottom left. Only 16% are saying, yeah, we always do. The vast majority of you are saying you rarely or never ask the shipper to pay for keeping you detained. Even though, as you look on the right, shippers ding you for everything they can: lumper services, late deliveries, damaged or spoiled freight. They have no problem with making you pay for those things. Remember, research shows that companies with good safety records are likely to have good financial performance too. ELDs will help improve your financial performance by giving you a tool to show shippers how they're affecting your use of your trucks. And I think, as you can see there from what Mark Seymour has said, is that it forces conversations with shippers about how they treat drivers. And I think that can only be a healthy thing. We need to be having those conversations, because tired drivers, as a result of shippers being negligent in how they treat them, is not a good thing. It's something that this industry does need to fix. All right, so I just want to spend the last few minutes that we have looking at a few other things in terms of the impact on safety trends. Uh, the pandemic has been good in some things. So, for example, again, this is from the folks at OmniTrack. They looked at a variety of things such as hard braking, lane departures, uh, overspeed, roll stability, et cetera, and took a look at the effect that the pandemic seems to have had, because we're charting uh, things that happened from the time of the pandemic and onwards. You'll see that since the pandemic, there was a significant drop in things such as hard braking, lane departures, roll stability. And I think that the major reason for that is because there's just fewer trucks on the road, fewer vehicles in general on the road. So the roads became safer. Uh, it did go back up, but notice it kind of, again, it has kind of flattened out. So hopefully uh, our roads are becoming safer as because they're not quite as busy right now. One thing that does remain a concern, though, and it didn't really show much of a change, is things such as excessive overspeed or just simply being overspeed. Notice there was a little bit of a dip in that, but then it went just right back to normal. And really, this is attributable to safety habits that, or rather, lack of safety habits that need to be addressed and need to be changed. It's not that we were all that confident in our safety before the pandemic. The research that we have shows that we had concerns about some of our safety practices, in particular as they relate to new. If you look at the research that we did with our Reader Pulse survey, when we asked about driver etiquette, do you think there's a sense of a declining driver? Look at the high percentage. 93% of people answering the survey said, yes, I think driver etiquette is declining. Do you think most entry-level drivers lack good manners on the road? 81% of you agreed with that. 99% of you agreed that etiquette should be included in the training for entry-level drivers. When we dig a little bit deeper, all right, so what areas do you think entry-level drivers require more training than they receive today? Take a look at the first three answers, chart on the left. Driving in poor weather conditions, critically important for a country like Canada. Management, remember all that overspeeding that did not go away with the pandemic. Hazard perception, those are all directly related to safety. And then the fourth one, basic truck operation. So our perception as an industry is that we're having entry drivers coming in and they still require basic truck operation training. That's interesting. And then in terms of what kind of work should an entry-level driver be doing, they should be spending time with a man. They should be on local trips. They should be driving dry van. They should not be driving across the country. They shouldn't be driving some of the more exotic combinations. And they shouldn't be driving on their own. That's what the industry believes. Here's another statistic that actually also kind of worries me. Now, if you can look at it from the positive end of things, when we ask, do you believe that you receive enough training to do your job? 2/3 of you say yes. But what about that 1/3 that says no, they don't receive enough training? And then when we follow up and say, okay, when was the last time you attended a formal training session? Work your way down to the bottom where we have basically 45% that say it's between 6 months and a year since they last received any training. And another 13% on top of that, the last time they received training was before they got hired. I think that's a statistic we need to improve upon. The final thing, and I think this is a particularly interesting one, is that we tend to believe that the problem is never us. it's the other guy. Because when we ask if you could receive more training in one area, what would it be? Well, I want to learn about emerging technologies. I want to learn about business processes. What about health and safety? What about defensive driving? That's the one we just said. People need more time, need to be spending more time on that, need to be paying more attention to it. But we tend to think we're not the problem, it's the new guys or the other guy that's the problem. We just want to focus on emerging technologies of business practices. So that's something to keep in mind when you're making the pitch for why you need to stick to the basics of what makes for safe practices within your fleet. And the last thing I want to leave you with is the exact same I left you with years ago, which is this: safety is not magic. It doesn't just happen. It's a lot of hard work. And if we don't put in the hard work, then we can't be as safe as we need to be. Thank you, folks. I hope you found the presentation interesting, and now to any questions that you may have.